Phillip Lee.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I begin by congratulating members on their contributions, particularly the member for Suffolk South, who I thought made a very interesting speech, although he did have the good fortune of following the Shadow Secretary of State and her speech, which I must say really was terribly negative. If there's one thing that this area of energy and climate change needs is some cross-party agreement. Dealing with energy challenges and dealing with challenges of climate change don't fit in on a 5-year term of Parliament, and the reality is that there needs to be some agreement and some understanding on policy over decades, not just terms of Parliament. Of course.
Point. Would he indicate to the House whether he believes that his party should reaffirm the Climate Change Committee's statement that there should be a 50% reduction by 2025?
I thank you for your intervention. My view on that is, first of all, these targets are extremely difficult to meet anyway. One of the reasons that they're difficult to meet is that, with respect to the previous administration, energy policy under your government was woeful. Admittedly, it improved when the shadow leader of opposition took over the post that the Honourable Lady now shadows. So with regards to targets, I leave that to others. But the Honourable Gentleman knows that we are in a difficult position to hit these targets, even for 2020, and that difficulty was not actually aided by the previous government's performance. Now, in the interests of the spirit of the bill, I'm going to try and speak within the generous time limit and try and save some energy. I'm quite struck by the fact that the time limit is so long, because for me, energy and the challenge of securing energy supply is one of the most important strategic challenges of our generation. You can't have more hospitals, you can't have more schools, you can't have more aircraft carriers, you can't have anything else in government unless you've got energy. Energy matters, and it matters very much. Today I want to speak about two issues. First of all, primarily about the Green Deal, because that's the heart of this bill. But I will also move on to discuss energy generation and my own thoughts, views on technology of the future that I think as a country we should be backing. Now, the Green Deal is an ambitious plan. It is the first of its kind in the world. Of course, it requires additional clarifications. I hear that the opposition want more detail. This will come in the committee stages, I have no doubt. But the reality is, it is the first time this has been attempted. And I'm very proud of that, and to be supporting a government that is introducing it. It will be benefiting homes, it will be benefiting businesses. It will allow both to save money. Saving money at the moment matters to individuals, it matters to families, and I would suggest it matters very much to businesses. It's a tough environment out there economically, and if they can save money, all the better. Now, this Green Deal involves the introduction of a new financial framework, a financial framework that is subjected to market forces. So those calling for details on interest rates, I think we just wait and see and let the market dictate. The reality is, particularly when it comes to long-term energy products, particularly in the area of generation, if I was in control of a sizable pension fund, I'd been investing in something like this because it's going to return in the medium to longer term. So the idea that the interest rates are going to be driven high by this, I don't buy into that at all. And the scheme is pay as you save. I mean, the reality is it will benefit those people who are struggling with their bills at the moment. The loan is suggested to be £6,500. I'm hearing rumours that may be slightly increased. And the loan will be against the property, not against the individual. And that's an important distinction. In the past, when we've tried to go down this path on policy, we've always worried about it going with the individual and indeed those who are less likely able to be able to afford the loan, not taking it out for that reason. The reality is this is going to be attached to the property. The second aspect of this involves this energy company obligation that's going to be introduced to replace the CERT. Now, as I understand it, this is to target those who potentially could experience fuel poverty and indeed homes which are difficult to insulate. And I recall a member from Scotland earlier referring to the difficulties of some homes in terms of insulation. Well, this idea is within this bill is to deal with those problems. And in view of the fact that 25% of carbon emissions are thought to come from those very homes, it strikes me as an investment worth making. So in sort of review of the Green Deal, it's estimated, and I'm always slightly cautious about these estimates because it's always dependent upon behaviour, human behaviour. Secretary of State's already made reference to having a Brazilian wife. I mean, the reality is that when you make these estimates, it isn't always accurate, but it is suggested that the benefits to society will be in the realms of £8 to £9 billion. 14 million insulation measures required, which could lead to an average saving of £550 per year on domestic bills. This will lead to increase in manufacturing jobs. I mean, in my own constituency of Bracknell, I know that there are small and medium construction firms crying out for this type of work. There's going to be no shortage of companies coming forward. And it's not just in manufacturing. We're also getting an increase in service jobs as well. If we can hit the 26 million homes to take up the scheme, we may see an increase in jobs in the sector from 27,000 to 250,000. That's pretty good, I think. Now, moving on to the additional measures within the bill, I welcome changes to the Energy Act to ease the introduction of smart meters. I have a number of companies, not least of which General Electric, who will be very pleased to hear about that. And clearly smart meters, if they're functioning right, and if they can connect into the network, and I know that there are some issues there, smart meters are an essential part of trying to reduce our energy usage, because ultimately that's what this is all about. And I must say, I congratulate the front bench on making energy efficiency the key part of their first bill, because that's actually the easiest way for us to reduce our carbon footprint. And I was struck on a recent trip to Norway that even though they generate huge amounts of energy, the first thing they said to me was, Philip, the best thing that Britain can do is become more energy efficient. And I know that the same views are held in Sweden. Now, moving on to the other measure which I'm quite pleased about, are the balance of powers between government and the nuclear industry with regards to decommissioning. I'm a strong advocate of nuclear power, and I did find it rather depressing to hear yet another speech on the dangers of nuclear power from the member for Cheltenham. I must remind him that as yet there's never been a proven death from nuclear power in the West. So, oh, of course, I'm interested to hear his.
Briefly, I have on occasion made speeches about the dangers of nuclear power, but that actually wasn't one of them. I was actually talking about the dangers of subsidising nuclear power through the removal of Section 102.
Forgive me, I mean, I thought you said something about compensation to agriculture and people moving house, etc., etc. But anyway, I shall move on. Energy generation will be the final part of my speech, and I think this is, I mean, I commend the previous government for their decision on committing towards offshore wind. I think it was strategically an important decision, and in view of the fact that we have shallow water in the North Sea, I think it was the right decision to make. I'm not so sure about onshore wind, but offshore wind for sure. But going forward, this country needs a sustainable energy policy. It needs sustainable sources of energy. They need to be low carbon, and they need, most importantly, to be secure. With an increasing world population, and I note that the world population is hitting the 7 billion target earlier than projected, and one doesn't have to be a doctor to know that means they will hit it earlier than with 8 billion and 9 billion and 10 billion, because that's what human beings do. And that concerns me, because ultimately, future wars on this planet are going to be over energy, fuel, not just oil, gas, food, water. And the reality is this country has really got to get real. They've got to realise that energy matters. Energy is associated with prosperity. Everybody knows it. And we can't rely upon the way that we did things in the past. We need to be looking to the future and working out how Britain can become as energy independent as it possibly can be. And allow me to mention just two areas. Marine technology. The UK is surrounded by energy. Water is just the medium that transmits that energy. Tidal power is the moon, and we have the Severn Bore. Waves, particularly off Scotland, remarkable sources of energy. Why are we not concentrating on trying to harness that? I mean, it strikes me as a no-brainer. When I looked further at this, the renewable obligation certificates, why is it that in Scotland you get more for tidal and for wave than you do in England? How is that paid for? And why is it different? And I would ask the Minister to look at that. And I know that there is a review going on over ROCs at the moment, and I would encourage him to look at it. And why is solar so subsidised and not marine? And this is a decision by the previous administration. Solar is subsidised 9 times more than onshore wind. I don't know about you, but I know we're having some good weather at the moment, but I don't think that really makes any sense in this country. Now, I know the government's doing a review of low-carbon technologies. £200 million is going to be allocated. I would hope that they would look at marine technology and try and do their very best to support it, because I think it is an opportunity for us to lead the world. If you believe the Renewables UK, it is an opportunity for us to generate 20% of our energy. And specifically with the Severn Bore, which I recognise the capital cost and the potential local environmental impact, but 12 to 15% of the UK's electricity needs from one project. I think we need to look at this again. Of course.
The Honourable Gentleman for giving way, and he's making a number of very interesting points with regard to the renewables sector, and of course he's absolutely right that with 5 ROCs, I think, in Scotland for marine renewables and 3 south of the border, that doesn't particularly help. And with regard to the wave hub off the north of my coast, which will be the first of that commercial scale in the world, clearly we do need to find a way forward. But how does he propose that we address this issue of trying to get parity north and south of the border?
Well, thank you for the intervention. I actually don't know the answer to that question. It just strikes me it's just another example of how Scotland is different to England, and I'm getting somewhat frustrated about that. Can I move on to new nuclear technology just quickly? Firstly, molten salts reactors eats nuclear waste and no proliferation concerns. It's a no-brainer. How come we're not pursuing this one? And finally, on thorium. Thorium actually may very well be in the honourable member's constituency. It's in the cliffs of Cornwall. It's also found in Wales. And the greatest resource is in Norway, a relatively stable country compared to where we get most of our energy from. 3 times more abundant than uranium. Does not produce any dangerous waste, which incidentally is why it wasn't pursued in the 50s, because it didn't create plutonium needed for nuclear weapons. China is now going big time on this, as is India. How come we're not? It strikes me as an obvious thing for us to go for. It may satisfy my Liberal Democrat colleagues because it's safer to produce and doesn't produce any nuclear waste of note, and it certainly satisfied me because we can source the thorium more easily. So in conclusion, at a time when Britain has got significant economic challenges to deal with, finding ways to save energy strikes me as an obvious target for us. And I think that the Green Deal itself is fantastic for families, fantastic for individuals, fantastic for businesses, which is why I'm very happy and pleased to be supporting the bill. And I hope that with regards to energy generation, the Minister will take this away and give some thought to what I've said. Thank you.
Mike Weir.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.